This lesson is on naming ionic compounds, specifically binary and ones with polyatomic ions. Ones with transition metals, we'll do that one at a later date. So let's quickly review what a binary compound is. A binary compound has only two different elements in them. One of the atoms will be the metal atom, cation, and the other will be a non-metal atom, the anion. Now here's the key. It doesn't matter if you have more than one of either element in the formula, as long as there's only two different elements in the formula. Now when we name these, the name of the formula unit or the ionic compound is as follows. You list the cation first, and you write the full name as it's listed on the periodic table. So the name is as listed on the periodic table. The anion is always listed last. Now it's the nonmetal with "ide" as the suffix. So here are some examples. Sodium, that's the metal, and then chlorine is the nonmetal. So sodium is written as the full name, and then chlorine is not written chlorine, it's written chloride. Magnesium is the metal, and then chlorine again is the nonmetal, but it's not written as chlorine, it's written as chloride. And the last one is calcium nitride. And so the calcium is written as full metal name, and then nitrogen is abbreviated the nitride. Now notice again, when I said to you that you can have more than one of each atom in there, so this one has 3 calciums and 2 nitrogens, but it only has 2 different elements, calcium and nitrogen. So therefore it's still a binary compound. So here's the list of all the ides versions of the elements that are generally anions. Now there's a way that you can write it out, but one way is just to kind of memorize these. And there's a couple of easy ways to do it. One is anytime you see the word INE at the end, that gets dropped. YGEN or OGEN, that gets dropped. And the OUSs get dropped, ORUSs. So, for example, bromine would be bromide, chlorine would be chloride, oxygen, oxide, carbon, carbide, hydrogen, hydride, etc., etc. So if you're good at memorization, this probably is something easy to memorize. If you're not good at memorization, write the word out, add the "ide" where you think it goes, and see if it sounds right. If it doesn't sound right, there's probably something else you need to work on. All right? So there you go. There's some examples right there. But you'll get better at doing these when you start practicing them more. Okay, so how do we write the name of binary compounds? There's some practice here. So let's look at this real quick. The first thing you have to do is identify what are your cations and anions. And the only way to do that is to break up the element, break up the compound into the 2 parts. So remember, the start of any element is a capital letter. So when you do a binary compound, you're going to look for the second capital letter. And then you're going to put a slash right in front of it, and that's the start of that new element. So here we go. Let's look at this one. So nitrogen is my first capital letter. C is my second capital letter, so I'm going to put a line right down there. A is my first capital letter. This is a small l, and then so the B is my second capital letter, so that goes there. C is my first capital letter, and the F is my second capital letter. Okay, so what I've already done is I've put the separation between my cation, my metal ion, and my anion. Now I know how to name them. So we're just going to look these up on the periodic table. So Na is sodium. So I write the full name of sodium. And then Cl is chlorine, but we don't write chlorine, we write chloride. Aluminum is Al. So we write aluminum. And the bromine is the second part, so we don't write bromine, we write bromide. Now notice here, there is a 3 with the bromine. So let's look at that. Just because there's a 3 there doesn't mean that we write tribromide or triple bromide. We just write bromide because there's no other way to form that compound. So in an ionic compound, you do not write di, tri, tetra, whatever, right? You just write the full name of the cation, the ide name of the anion. So then we go down here to calcium. So we have calcium, Ca. That's the Ca. This is the Al. This is Br, Cl. And then F is fluorine. But we don't write fluorine, we write fluoride. And then the last one is barium. That's Ba. And then nitrogen. So we don't write nitrogen, we write nitride. And there you have it. So again, when you write the words out, you want to leave a space between your cation and anion name, but you don't have to have a large space, just like your regular in a sentence. All right, so I just made things up nice and clean on this page so you can see the names. All right, so on this page, what I'd like you to do is you're going to do the practice on this one. So you're going to take some time, stop the video when I tell you to, on a piece of scrap paper, write the names of each one of these properly with the correct ides and all that, and then start the video again when you want to check it, all right? So remember, separate your cation from your anion, use your periodic table to find the element name, write the full element name of the cation. The anion always ends with the words ide. So once you stop the video now. So here are the answers for the ones that I've asked you to do. Hopefully you've got them all right. Right, just sodium oxide, aluminum bromide, right, beryllium fluoride, and then barium phosphide. So like the binary system for the cation anion with the elements, when you use the polyatomic ions, they already have a name associated with it. You do not have to rename them with the ides. So here is the list of all the polyatomic ions that we could use in class, right? You do not, I repeat, you do not have to memorize this. I will give this to you on a quiz or a test, right? Because it's just stuff that you shouldn't have to memorize, right? Now, when you name it, just like you did before, you're going to name the cation first, the full name, and then the anion. Now, instead of adding the word ide, the name of the polyatomic ion is written as it is right here. So for example, if you had calcium sulfate, CaSO4, the sulfate right here, you look this up, SO4, and you see the name sulfate, that's what we'd write. All right. Now there are two cation polyatomic ions, that's NH4, the ammonium ion, and H3O+, the hydronium ion. All the rest that we're going to deal with in class are the anions, or the negative ions. So just like you did before, the cation gets listed first, then the anion. If it's a polyatomic ion, instead of writing the word ide, you just write the name of the polyatomic ion. Let's show you some examples. One of the questions that always comes up to me is, how do I know if I have a polyatomic ion in my compound? And there's really no easy way to answer that question, but there is a little bit of a helpful hints that I can give you. One, in a binary ionic compound, there's only 2 capital letters. Because remember, each capital letter starts the beginning of a new element. Okay? So let's look at, like for example, sodium chloride right here, NaCl. There's 1 and then there's 2. So that means that there's only 2 elements in that one. In a polyatomic one, there's going to be more than 2. Generally, there's 3. So let's look at here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so if you have more than 2, then you have a polyatomic ion. Now the second thing is, how do I know which one is my polyatomic ion? Well, that's a good question too. Generally, the polyatomic ion has to have the 2 capital letters near or next to each other. Right? So these 2 are next to each other. These 2 are next to each other. Now, these all 3 are next to each other. So which one is which? Well, that's going to have to be a little bit more descriptive, because you're going to look up NH4 and see if that's a polyatomic ion, or is it H4Cl. And you know it's NH4. Right? So in that particular case, it's going to be a little bit, you have to do a little bit of detective work. All right? CO3 is 1, NO3 is 1, PO4 is 1. Okay? So, now that we know which their polyatomic ions, we can separate them out, right? So here's my polyatomic ion, here's my polyatomic ion, here's my polyatomic ion, and here's my polyatomic ion. So now I'm going to name them, right? So we do exactly what we just did before. Sodium. And then we look up NO3, and we find out that that's nitrate on our polyatomic ion sheet. Al, aluminum. So we write aluminum. And then we look up CO3, and that's carbonate. Remember, I'm not writing the "ide", I'm just writing the 8, right? Whatever that is, whatever the name is. And then here, NH4, that is the ammonium ion. And then we just write chloride. Remember, it's not chlorate because chloride is Cl. And the last one is barium, Ba. And then PO4 is phosphate. And there you have it, right? Remember, you don't write the di or tri, even though if you have 2 or more of them, right? Like these, because we don't write that. We just write the name and then the other name. And so that's it. All right. So again, you got to determine whether or not you have a polyatomic ion. If you do, you use the list to get the name. You don't write an "ide".